Great. Well, thank you to the organizers for inviting me and giving me this opportunity to share with you a little bit of my story and a little bit of what the UAE is doing in space. And more importantly, answer that question, at least from our vantage point. To me, one thing that, I got involved in the space industry as soon as the UAE established a space agency. Before that, I had no idea about anything to do with, I knew that people went to space. I knew that people went to the moon at some point. I knew there was this thing going around called the International Space Station. Had no idea where it was. But I got this question a lot once I got into space, and I'll explain to you how that happened. But before that, as was mentioned, I was part of the UAE Embassy in Washington, D.C. here, dealing with trade, commercial and trade affairs, trying to help further diversify the UAE economy and bridge the gap between some US companies and UAE companies and further that diversification process. And if you look at this chart, there's quite a bit of diversification going on when we have now, as a country with 10% of the world's oil reserves, 70% of our GDP is from the non-oil sector. So we've successfully been able to figure out different industries where we have a comparative and competitive advantage and invest in those, utilizing the oil wealth that we had and investing in those for the day that comes that we would not have oil anymore, and to accelerate the push to alternative sources of energy as well. So we have a big project with nuclear energy. We have one with alternative energy, solar, wind, and geothermal, and investments all over the world in those areas. So it was very important to us to further diversify the economy. And so to answer that initial question, I look at it, I kind of compartmentalize the answer from our vantage point into three different areas. One being to further diversify the economy, because there's the clear ancillary benefits that can be had by entering into the space sector. The second is there's a geopolitical type of aspect that we were able to address with taking part in the space industry. And the third I'll get to throughout the presentation as well. But I kind of mentioned already who I am, where I've come from. But in 2014, when the space agency was established, the Director General, His Excellency Mohammed Al-Ahbabi, came to me and said, Talal, you've been involved with defense acquisitions and stuff at the agency and in your commercial role in dealing with ITAR, which is the export control type regime that the US has in trying to get technologies released. And I'm hoping that you'd be able to help us. We're establishing this thing called the Space Agency, and we're going to need some support with ITAR as well, inevitably. And so I thought, okay, just another sector to add to the commercial affairs a function that I played at the embassy, and I was, very nonchalant about it and thought, okay, it can't be that difficult. And then he told me to go to JPL to talk to them about DSN. And I was like, what the hell are those acronyms? I have no idea what JPL is, and I definitely don't know what DSN is. JPL, I kind of knew. I had a genius friend in college when I went to school in Long Beach who had worked for the Aerospace Corporation and did work for JPL. So I thought, okay, that's like a place where smart people go. Why do you want me to go there? DSN, what's that? So what does anyone do when they have a question like that? Turn on YouTube and self-learn. And I went down that rabbit hole since that day, and till today, I still am trying to self-learn as much as possible in this industry because it's intriguing. And I've always been into technology. I've always loved and enjoyed technology, and thought, okay, this is a great way to be able to follow my passion. And so when the opportunity came about a year ago to transition to the space agency from the embassy after 9 years here in Washington, I didn't think twice. I thought, great, I can move the family, go back to the UAE, and then pursue what I've become passionate about. To talk a little bit about the space industry or the space sector in the UAE and where it started, it all started back with the late founder of the UAE, Sheikh Zayed, when in 1976, so the UAE was formed in 1971. A few years later, when one of the Apollo missions was completed, the astronauts came down and met with our late founder and gifted him this flag that flew on the Apollo mission. And so since that time, he had some very intriguing questions. We heard stories about the questions he would ask about how space could help and benefit humanity, and especially in our region with water issues and things of that nature. So About 20 years later, we established a company called Thuraya that does satellite telecommunications. They're exhibiting upstairs over here, so we're very proud of the accomplishments they've had. They've recently merged with Yasat, which is another satellite telecommunication company that we have that provide broadband services as well. And so these were investments that the UAE were making in the space industry and those nascent initial steps that we took in that direction. There was also another outfit out of Dubai called the Mohammed bin Rashid Space Center that worked with a Korean company, or I would say it's a Korean entity that helped them build Dubai-Sat-1, which is an Earth observation satellite, and we had some embedded engineers with them over there in Korea for about 10 years or so. And then they built Dubai-Sat-2, which was with the same Korean outfit, but this time was done kind of 50-50 between the UAE and in Korea. And then Khalifa-Sat, which launched last year, which is 100% built and made in the UAE by UAE engineers. So there was a clear path and pattern of knowledge transfer and a very methodical approach trying to gain human capital in this industry so that we could utilize it when needed. And when needed came in 2014 when we established the Space Agency. And so this was a way to try to get the whole industry under one overarching umbrella and have a federal government entity there that can help advance the space interests that the UAE has on behalf of the different sporadic and scattered types of entities that we had in the UAE. And during that time, simultaneous to the announcement of the establishment of the agency, the leadership of the UAE, we had what I usually refer to as the Kennedy moonshot type moment, when our leader, His Highness Sheikh Mohammed bin Rashid Al Maktoum, said that, not only are we establishing an agency, but we want to reach Mars by our 50th year anniversary, which is 2021. So it was very ambitious and 6-year time horizon. So we knew it was going to take a lot more than the satellites that we built in terms of experience and partnerships, et cetera. And I'll get to what we're doing there in a couple of slides. But 2019, we will be in September of this year sending our first astronaut. So we also have an astronaut program that was established and announced a couple of years ago. Those two gentlemen over here trained, and the person to your right is Hazza al-Mansouri, and he'll be heading to the space station on September 25th of this year. So we're very, very proud. And the one thing that's very notable about the process that we had here is we had 4,000 applicants. 4,000 applicants, 34% were women in our part of the world. And that's something that I think till today, it's hard for me to fathom, but it's a testament and validation to the investment that our leadership have on empowering both the youth and gender balance and gender equality in our part of the world. So that was something that was very inspiring. So the Mars mission that I mentioned, the concept came up in 2014. We began in 2015 working on things. We partnered with a few different. We wanted to make sure we weren't partnering with other space agencies and academia, but leaning on them for support. Other space agencies and industry. But we went towards academia because we thought it would be a great way for our engineers to then embed with those academic teams, like the University of Colorado's in Boulder's LASP, the Laboratory of Advanced Science and Physics, University of Berkeley, University of Arizona. So the instruments that we're developing and the mission that we're designing has been done in collaboration with them, with UAE engineers learning along the way. So this is very, very important to us. And obviously, it's an orbiter, not a lander. So we're trying to study answer some questions of the Martian atmosphere and what happened to it that haven't been answered before. So it's kind of building on what at least the University of Colorado had in experience with MAVEN, and hopefully with the infrared spectrometer. There's an ultraviolet spectrometer and then also an imager. We'll be able to get some answers to some of those questions. But why is this important to us? Because when we looked at things, this was what we came up with. We share a lot of the same challenges. There are a lot of parallels between Mars and between the UAE and a desert type country like the UAE in our part of the world. And we suffer from challenges with energy security, food security, and water security. And so if we can figure out ways to solve them for Mars, we could effectively figure out ways that the benefits from those challenges we could make use of here on Earth and in our part of the world in particular. So there's also a long-term 100-year plan. In the UAE, we love those long-term plans where we have a goal and a stated vision and how we could sequentially figure out a way to get there. So Mars 2117, a 100-year plan to build a habitable settlement on Mars. Obviously, we're not going to do it alone. So this is where we're going to try to choreograph support from the different entities and individuals and space agencies from all over the world to try to work on this goal. The first step has been the HOPE probe, which is our orbiter that will go in 2020. Then we have a Mars Science City. Our Astronaut Program is also part of this. So it's all working towards this single goal of having a habitable settlement on Mars by 2117. But some of you may ask, and this goes back to my first question, why? And to us, we see our region as a very challenged one. Obviously, it'll be an understatement if I say that we live in a rough neighborhood in the UAE. It is a very rough neighborhood, and I'm sure you're all too familiar with the negative news that comes out of that part of the world. And what we're trying to do is, when we look at the span of the Middle East and North Africa, about 100 million under the age of 25, with over 35% unemployment. And so we can only do so much on the battlefield with coalition efforts that the UAE heavily take part in to try to take out high-value targets, et cetera. But that's not going to remove the problems that we've seen. What we do need to do is present an opportunity, an alternative opportunity for the youth in the region that have been gravitating towards that negativity, and looking at that to derive a sense of purpose. So what we're trying to do is we're betting on the positive impact that we can have with a space program to ensure that that we're winning the hearts and minds of that youth, so that we don't have that cyclical and negative force that's pulling the youth in the region. So that's one of the main reasons why we're doing it, apart from diversification and then the science and technology and ancillary benefits you can gain by utilizing space. And we want more stories like this. This is a young girl, the girl to the right. Her name is Ali Al-Mansouri. She was 14 when this picture was taken. She's about 16 now. And she won the Genes in Space competition that we put together with Boeing and the UAE Space Agency. And what she did was she came up with an experiment to monitor heat shock proteins and the expression of heat shock proteins in microgravity and high radiation environments. So was able to send that experiment to the ISS. That's when we were there at Kennedy Space Center, where her experiment went up on a Falcon 9, and we got to watch the rocket land right there next to us on the pad. And it was a very, very inspiring experience. Inspiring even for someone like me who just got into space in 2014, a couple years before this, to see her reacting to it and to see someone of her age had been not only inspired by the space industry, but pursuing her path towards wanting to be. And the reason she was doing that experiment was because she wants to be the first woman on Mars, and she wants to be able to protect the body from the inside out rather than the outside in with astronaut suits. So that's why she was doing this experiment. So we want more Aliyas, not just in the UAE, but regionally. A couple of weeks ago, we announced the formation of the Arab Space Cooperation Group while we were at the Global Space Congress in Abu Dhabi. It's a group of 11 countries that we've kind of put together to help them, to effectively help us build our own competition in the region and to allow for them to also be enabled and them to also inspire the youth in their countries. And if they don't, and if some of the countries that didn't choose to pursue that don't do that, then we want to be able to at least have an outlet for even the kids in refugee camps that are, in some of the countries over there that are suffering from the different geopolitical forces, to continue to think about pursuing STEM education and not think that there's nowhere that they would be able to practice it. We in the UAE are going to present a platform for them. We're hoping that their countries will also lead the effort as well. And that's basically, those are the three reasons that we're involved in this. And that's why I'm personally so excited and so lucky to be a part of this sector and represent the UAE in doing this. So with that, I thank you very much. Yeah.